He laughed in my face and said the idea was now the company's, not mine. The boardroom erupted in applause as he presented my algorithm, my code, my sleepless nights packaged as his visionary leadership. $10 million. That's what they valued my work at. I stood there, silent, watching him bask in stolen glory. He'd forgotten one crucial detail, though. In my blazer pocket, folded neatly, was patent certificate WAR-US 9898274B1, filed 6 months before I ever walked through these doors. My name is Avery Cole, and I've spent the last 3 years building something that could save lives. At 34, I'm what they call a technical founder, the kind who prefers debugging code at 2 a.m. to schmoozing investors at cocktail parties. Originally from a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, I'd traded cornfields for Colorado mountains, chasing the startup dream with nothing but a second-hand laptop and an algorithm that could revolutionize real-time audio signal processing in medical devices. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in that glass-walled conference room at Fictionalized Labs, watching Julian Marks, our newly minted CEO after the Series B round, sell my life's work to a room full of executives from Samsung Medical. He gestured dramatically at the projection screen, showing my interface, my code, architecture, my breakthrough in noise reduction that could detect heart murmurs in newborns with 97% accuracy. This proprietary technology, he said, his tailored suit catching the afternoon light, represents Fictionalized Labs' commitment to innovation. We've developed this entirely in-house, and it's ready to scale globally. In-house. The words tasted bitter. I thought about the countless nights in my garage apartment, soldering circuit boards while my neighbors complained about the smell, the failed prototypes scattered across my kitchen table, the moment when the algorithm finally worked, and I'd cried alone in my makeshift lab because there was no one else to share it with. I'd been naive, perhaps. When Marcus Chen, no relation despite the name, the angel investor who'd first believed in my vision, introduced me to Fictionalized Labs, I thought I'd found my tribe. They needed someone who understood both the technical complexity and the market potential. I needed resources, a team, a chance to see my creation help real patients. We'll protect your IP, they'd promised. You'll maintain ownership of your core technology while we handle the business side. The term sheet seemed straightforward. I'd even hired a lawyer, not a great one, admittedly, but all I could afford. Now, 18 months later, I watched my technology being packaged and sold while I'd been systematically excluded from strategic meetings, relegated to technical advisor status. My access to the original codebase mysteriously revoked last month. The Samsung executives were impressed. Of course they were. The technology was revolutionary. It was also mine. I shifted slightly, feeling the weight of the folded patent certificate in my pocket. Patent WAR-US 9898274B1, filed March 12th, 6 months before I'd ever heard of Fictionalized Labs. My insurance policy, suggested by an old MIT roommate who'd been burned before. Always file first, join later, she'd said. In this industry, your ideas are your only real currency. Julian caught my eye and smiled, that practiced, predatory smile of someone who thinks they've already won. He had no idea that I'd just started playing. The journey to that boardroom betrayal began 3 years earlier in my garage apartment on Pearl Street. Boulder winters are brutal when your workspace is an unheated garage, but I barely noticed the cold. I was too focused on solving a problem that had haunted me since my nephew was born with an undetected heart condition. The traditional stethoscope, essentially unchanged since 1816, relied on human ears to detect subtle abnormalities. But what if we could amplify those sounds, filter out ambient noise, and use machine learning to identify patterns invisible to even trained physicians? That question consumed me. I'd liquidated my 401k, all $47,000 of it, to fund the initial research. My dining table became a graveyard of failed prototypes. Version 1 through 15 sat in a box labeled expensive mistakes. But version 16 showed promise. By version 23, I had something revolutionary. an algorithm that could isolate specific frequency patterns in heartbeats and breathing, achieving accuracy rates that made traditional methods look medieval. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been awake for 36 hours, surviving on gas station coffee and sheer determination. When the algorithm correctly identified 17 different cardiac conditions in my test data with 94% accuracy, I sat in stunned silence. Then I did what any rational person would do. I ran the test again. And again. The results held. That's when I made my first smart decision: filing for a patent. The application cost me $3,000 I didn't have, charged to a credit card already groaning under the weight of component purchases. But my MIT roommate Sarah's voice echoed in my head. Protect your IP first, celebrate later. 6 months after filing, with a provisional patent secured and early FDA approval discussions underway, I attended a Denver startup meetup. That's where Marcus Rodriguez found me, a serial entrepreneur turned angel investor who'd made his fortune in medical devices. "Show me," he said simply after my fumbling elevator pitch. I did. In my garage, surrounded by the chaos of creation, I demonstrated how my device could detect a heart murmur in a recording that 3 cardiologists had missed. Marcus was silent for a long moment, then asked, "What do you need?" "A team," I admitted. "I can build the technology, but I need people who understand FDA approval, manufacturing, distribution." That's how Sonics Labs entered the picture. Marcus had invested in them during their Series A, a promising medical device startup with strong operations but weak technical innovation. "They need someone like you," he said, "and you need infrastructure." The initial terms seemed fair. I'd join as Chief Product Officer, bringing my technology into their portfolio while maintaining inventors' rights. The lawyers, mine charging $200 an hour, theirs probably 10 times that, hammered out an agreement. I'd transfer certain implementation rights to Sonics for commercialization, but the core algorithm remained mine. Julian Marks joined 6 months later, brought in by the Series B investors who wanted experienced leadership, Harvard MBA, 2 successful exits, the kind of CEO who could sell ice to Eskimos. He spoke fluently about synergies and market penetration while I built the actual product. At first, we worked well together. I handled the technical side. He handled the business. He'd even defended my budget request to the board, arguing that innovation required investment. I was grateful for a partner who understood the value of what we were building. The shift was gradual. First, I noticed my invitations to investor meetings had stopped coming. "We don't want to overwhelm them with technical details," Julian explained. Then, my access to financial projections was restricted. "Focus on product development," he said. "Let me worry about the business side." When key engineering decisions started being made without my input, I pushed back. That's when Julian showed his true colors. "Avery," he said during what I thought was a routine one-on-one, "you're brilliant, but you need to understand your role here. You're a technical resource, not a business partner." "I'm a co-founder," I corrected. He laughed, not cruelly, but dismissively, which was worse. "Check your contract. You're an employee with some equity. An important employee, sure, but still an employee." That night, I reread every document I'd signed. He was technically right. In my eagerness to see my technology help people, I'd accepted terms that left me vulnerable, but I had one advantage Julian didn't know about. Patent DAR US 9898274B1 was filed under my name alone, months before Sonics Labs existed. I'd built something worth $10 million in my garage with my own hands, my own money, my own sleepless nights. And I'd be damned if I'd let a smooth-talking MBA steal it from me. The Samsung medical presentation was just the beginning. After that boardroom performance, Julian's mask of civility crumbled entirely. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions worth $10 million. As the executives filed out, Julian caught my arm. "My office." "Now," he said, his salesman's smile never wavering. I followed him down the hallway, lined with motivational posters and pictures of the team at various milestones, several featuring me demonstrating early prototypes, though I noticed those had been moved to less prominent positions lately. Julian's corner office screamed success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the flat irons, a putting green in one corner, diplomas and awards strategically positioned for video calls. He closed the door and turned to face me, dropping all pretense. "What the hell was that look you gave me during the presentation?" he demanded. "What look?" I kept my voice neutral. "Don't play dumb, Avery. I saw your face when I discussed our proprietary technology." I chose my words carefully. I was surprised by some of the claims about in-house development. The core algorithm, he interrupted, moving behind his massive desk, was developed by a Sonex Labs employee using Sonex Labs resources. Everything you've created since joining belongs to the company. Julian, you know I brought the foundational technology with me, the signal processing methodology, the pattern recognition framework. He laughed then, that same dismissive sound from our last one-on-one, but sharper now, meaner. Avery, you really don't understand how this industry works, do you? You think because you tinkered in your garage, you own something? You signed an employment agreement, you assigned your work to the company. Future work, I corrected, not prior inventions. His eyes narrowed. Prove it. The patent certificate felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, but I stayed silent. Let him think he'd won. Here's what's going to happen. Julian continued, settling into his leather chair. You're going to continue in your role, supporting the technical team as needed, but strategic decisions, client interactions, anything involving the business side, that's my domain. Are we clear? Crystal, I replied. Good. Oh, and Avery? He pulled up something on his computer. You'll find your access privileges have been adjusted. We've restructured the development environment for security purposes. You'll have access to what you need for your current assignments, nothing more. I opened my laptop that afternoon to discover he wasn't bluffing. My administrative access was gone. The original codebase, my codebase, was now behind a wall I couldn't breach. Even my early development notes had been moved to an archived status I couldn't access. The next few days were a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. In team meetings, Julian would present my ideas as products of collaborative innovation. When I suggested improvements, he'd table them for future consideration before implementing them weeks later as his own initiatives. The breaking point came exactly 1 week after the Samsung meeting. Paula from legal approached my desk with a folder marked confidential. Hi, Avery, she said with false brightness. Just need you to sign some routine paperwork. IP assignment clarifications. Nothing major. I read through the documents carefully. They wanted me to retroactively assign all intellectual property related to audio signal processing, specifically including any patents, provisional patents, or patent applications, to Sonex Labs. This seems quite comprehensive, I said carefully. Paula's smile tightened. Julian wants to ensure our IP portfolio is clean for the Samsung deal. It's just a formality, really. Everyone's signing updated agreements. I'll need to review this with my lawyer. Of course, she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. Julian would like these completed by end of week. That night, I sat in my apartment, a modest upgrade from the garage, but still far from the luxury Julian enjoyed, and made a decision. They thought they were dealing with a naive engineer who could be bullied into submission. They were wrong. I signed every document Paula had given me, except the patent assignment. That page. I accidentally spilled coffee on, rendering it illegible. So sorry, I'd tell Paula. Could you print another copy? But first, I had calls to make, starting with Marla Ortiz, a patent attorney who'd graduated from MIT 2 years before me and now worked at a prestigious firm in D.C. We'd stayed in touch through alumni events, and she'd always said to call if I needed help. Marla, I said when she answered. Remember when you said big companies always underestimate the engineers? I think it's time to teach someone a lesson. My transformation from frustrated engineer to strategic operative began that night with Marla's advice echoing in my ears. Document everything, act normal, and never let them see you coming. The coffee-stained patent assignment form bought me 3 days. During that time, I became the model employee Julian wanted. Quiet, compliant, invisible. I arrived early, left on time, and smiled in meetings while mentally cataloging every piece of evidence I'd need. "Here's the clean copy," Paula said, delivering the replacement form with barely concealed irritation. "Please try to keep this one coffee-free." "Of course," I replied, signing every page except the crucial one. A strategic paperclip malfunction made it appear I'd signed the complete packet. Paula, eager to check this task off her list, didn't notice the missing signature on page 7. Meanwhile, my evenings were devoted to building my case. I forwarded personal copies of every email to a private server, starting with the original offer letter that explicitly stated I retained rights to pre-existing IP. Screenshots of Slack conversations where Julian acknowledged my prior work. Meeting recordings where he'd praised Avery's groundbreaking algorithm that she brought to Sonex. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Tom Rodriguez, one of our senior engineers, approached me after a particularly insulting meeting where Julian had presented my latest optimization as his own insight. "This is bullshit," Tom muttered, following me to the break room. "Everyone knows that's your work," I shrugged, playing the defeated engineer. "That's how it goes, I guess." Tom glanced around, then pulled out his phone. "I recorded the all hands from 6 months ago. You know, for team members who couldn't attend." He found the video and scrolled to a timestamp. "Listen to this." It was Julian's voice, clear and confident. "The breakthrough technology Avery brought to Sonex is what attracted our Series B funding. Her prior work in signal processing is the foundation of our entire product line." "Could you send me that?" I asked casually. "For my personal archives." Tom's knowing look suggested he understood exactly why I wanted it. "Already done." Marla, reviewing the growing mountain of evidence, was impressed. "You've got enough here to establish clear prior invention, but we need to move fast. Once they realize you haven't assigned the patent, they'll try other tactics." She was right. The following Monday, Julian announced a restructuring of the product team. My role was being evolved to focus on specialized technical documentation, corporate speak for being sidelined completely. "We appreciate everything you've contributed," he said in front of the entire team, his tone suggesting the opposite. "But as we scale, we need different skill sets in leadership positions." I nodded, swallowing my pride. "I understand. Whatever's best for the company." My new desk was in the basement, next to the server room. No windows, no team, no access to anything that mattered. They'd effectively buried me alive, professionally speaking, but they'd made a crucial error. In their eagerness to humiliate me, they'd forgotten that the basement also housed the backup servers, including email archives dating back to the company's founding. Archives that clearly showed the timeline of my invention versus my employment. I spent my days writing the technical documentation they'd assigned me, a mind-numbing task designed to make me quit. But I didn't quit. Instead, I used the solitude to perfect my strategy with Marla. "They're planning to announce the Samsung deal next month," I told her during one of our evening calls. $10 million for exclusive licensing rights to the technology. "Perfect," she replied. "We'll file the cease and desist letter the day before. Maximum impact." I also used my basement exile to do something else. Create comprehensive documentation of my original work, every algorithm, every innovation, every breakthrough, meticulously detailed with timestamps predating my employment. If they wanted technical documentation, I'd give them exactly that. 3 weeks into my basement purgatory, I ran into Julian in the parking garage. He was getting into his new Tesla, probably paid for with the bonus he'd received for closing the Samsung deal. "Avery," he said, not bothering to hide his smirk. "How's the documentation going?" "Thoroughly," I replied. "I'm documenting everything." Something in my tone must have registered because his smirk faltered slightly. But then he shrugged, dismissing me as he dismissed everything that didn't fit his worldview. "Keep up the good work," he said, climbing into his car. "Though I should mention, we're evaluating the need for that position. Budget constraints, you understand." I understood perfectly. They were going to fire me right before the deal closed, ensuring I had no claim to any success. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. That night, I sat in my small apartment, looking at patent US 9898274B1 one more time. Tomorrow, Marla would file the paperwork that would bring Julian's house of cards crashing down. But tonight, I allowed myself one moment of quiet satisfaction. They thought silence meant surrender. They were about to learn it meant something else entirely. Preparation. The morning everything changed started like any other in my basement office. I arrived at 7 a.m., made coffee in the break room while avoiding eye contact with former teammates, and settled in to continue my technical documentation. But at exactly 9 a.m. Eastern, Marla set our plan in motion. The first domino fell when Samsung's legal department received our cease and desist letter. Patent infringement. Unauthorized use of proprietary technology. Request for immediate halt to all negotiations regarding licensing of the disputed IP. Marla had crafted it perfectly, professional, precise, and devastating. By 9:30, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers I didn't answer. Then Tom texted, "Holy shit, what's happening? Julian just ran out of a meeting looking like he'd seen a ghost." At 10:15, Samsung's chief counsel called Sonics directly. I knew because I could hear Julian screaming from 2 floors down. The basement's thin ceiling had its advantages. At 10:47, Paula appeared at my desk, breathing hard from running down 2 flights of stairs. "Julian needs you in the boardroom. Now." I took my time gathering my things, including a folder I'd prepared for this moment. When I finally arrived at the boardroom 12 minutes later, the scene was chaos. Julian stood at the head of the table, face flushed, surrounded by lawyers, board members, and several faces on the conference screen I recognized as Samsung executives. "Avery!" Julian spat when I entered. "What the fuck did you do?" I sat down calmly, placing my folder on the table. "I protected my intellectual property." "Your intellectual property?" He slammed his hand on the table. "You assigned everything to the company." "No," I said, pulling out the employment agreement. "I assigned future work product. Page 12, Section 4.3 specifically excludes prior inventions listed in Schedule A. I produced Schedule A, which I filled out listing audio signal processing algorithms and related technologies. Though I noticed HR never provided me a countersigned copy, one of the board members, Sandra Williams, leaned forward. "What patent is Samsung referencing?" I pulled out the certificate. Patent number US 9898274B1, filed March 12, 6 months before I joined Sonics. It covers the core signal processing algorithm that powers our entire product line. The room erupted. Julian shouted about betrayal and corporate espionage. The lawyers huddled, whispering urgently. Samsung's executives watched with the detached interest of people witnessing a car crash that wasn't their fault. Sandra raised her hand for silence. "Ms. Cole, what exactly are you claiming?" "I'm claiming ownership of my invention," I replied. "The algorithm I developed independently, with my own resources, before joining this company. The same algorithm Mr. Marks has been shopping to Samsung as Sonics' proprietary technology." "This is ridiculous," Julian interjected. "Even if she had some preliminary work, everything was refined and developed here. Using my foundational technology," I interrupted, "which I never assigned to Sonics. Check your records. You'll find I specifically excluded it from all IP assignments." One of the lawyers finally spoke up. "She's right. The patent assignment page in her latest paperwork is unsigned." Julian turned purple. Paula said everything was complete. "There was a coffee incident," I said innocently. "And then a paperclip malfunction. These things happen." Sandra was scrolling through her phone, probably looking up the patent. This filing date. This predates not just your employment, but our entire Series B round. She looked at Julian. Did you know about this? Of course not, Julian protested. She deliberately hid it. I disclosed it in my employment documents, I corrected. I also mentioned it in multiple emails. Would you like me to pull up the one from last September where you acknowledged my groundbreaking prior work? The Samsung executives had been conferring quietly. Now their lead counsel spoke. Given this development, we're suspending all negotiations pending resolution of the IP ownership issue. We cannot risk acquiring disputed technology. This is sabotage, Julian shouted. This is consequences, I replied. Sandra stood. Mr. Marks, Ms. Cole, please remain. Everyone else, we need the room. As the others filed out, I caught Tom's eye. He gave me the slightest nod. Solidarity from an unexpected ally. When the door closed, Sandra fixed Julian with a stare that could freeze helium. Explain to me how you proceeded with a $10 million deal without verifying we owned the underlying technology. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once, the smooth-talking CEO had no words. Ms. Cole. Sandra turned to me. What do you want? I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, but my voice still shook slightly when I spoke. Justice. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The real negotiation was about to begin. And for the first time since joining Sonics, I held all the cards. The boardroom felt smaller with just the three of us. Sandra Williams sat at the head of the table, her 30 years of Silicon Valley experience evident in how she controlled the room without saying a word. Julian had moved from standing to sitting, his earlier bluster replaced by barely contained panic. Let's be clear about our position, Sandra began. Ms. Cole, you claim ownership of the foundational patent. Mr. Marks, you've been negotiating a deal based on technology we apparently don't own. The board needs solutions, not finger-pointing. Julian found his voice. She's an employee. She developed this technology for Sonics. Before Sonics, I interrupted, sliding a timeline across the table. Patent filed March 12th. Employment started September 15th. First prototype tested July 2021. Sonics Incorporated October 2021. The math is simple. Sandra studied the timeline. Our lawyers will need to verify this. They're welcome to, I replied, producing another document. Here's the full patent filing, the provisional application before that, and my development notebooks with dated entries. I've been meticulous. This is extortion, Julian hissed. This is documentation, I countered. Something you should have checked before claiming my work as company property. Sandra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. The other board members are asking for an emergency meeting. The Samsung deal was supposed to solve our runway issues. She looked at me. What are your demands? I opened my folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. 3 things. First, public acknowledgement that the core technology is my invention. Second, fair compensation for the use of my patent in all Sonics products. Third, I paused, meeting Julian's eyes. New leadership that understands the value of technical innovation and the people who create it. You want me fired? Julian's voice cracked. I want competent leadership, I clarified. Someone who doesn't steal credit, sideline inventors, and risk $10 million deals through willful ignorance. Sandra leaned back. And if we refuse? Then I enforce my patent rights, I said simply. Sonics can't sell, license, or deploy any products using my algorithm. Samsung walks. Your investors lose confidence. The company folds. I shrugged. Or we can find a solution that works for everyone. Everyone except me, Julian muttered. You made that choice when you laughed in my face, I reminded him. When you said my idea was the company's now. When you moved me to the basement to document my own obsolescence. Sandra's expression remained neutral. But I caught something in her eyes. Respect? Maybe. Ms. Cole, can you give us the room? Wait outside, Please. I gathered my documents, leaving copies for their review. As I reached the door, Sandra called out, Avery. Well played. The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat in the reception area, watching employees whisper and stare. Word had spread. The quiet engineer from the basement had just torpedoed the biggest deal in company history. Marla called twice. I texted back, in progress, standing by. Finally, Sandra emerged. We're ready for you. The boardroom had transformed. 3 more board members had arrived, laptops open, faces grave. Julian sat slouched in his chair, defeat written across his features. Sandra spoke for the group. We've reviewed your claims and consulted with our legal team. The board acknowledges your ownership of patent US 9898274B1. We're prepared to negotiate a licensing agreement for Sonix's continued use of your technology. And the leadership issue? I asked. One of the other board members, David Park, cleared his throat. Mr. Marks has agreed to transition out of the CEO role. We'll be searching for a replacement who better aligns with our technical focus. Julian stood abruptly. This is a coup. You're letting a disgruntled employee, a patent holder, Sandra corrected, whose technology you misrepresented as company property, nearly causing us to commit fraud. She turned back to me. We'll need to work quickly to salvage the Samsung relationship. Will you cooperate? Under the right terms, I agreed. Our lawyers will draft a proposal by tomorrow. In the meantime. Sandra paused, choosing her words carefully. Would you consider serving as interim CTO? We need someone who understands the technology to lead the Samsung discussions. I hadn't expected that. I'll consider it. As the meeting broke up, Julian brushed past me. You think you've won? You have no idea how to run a company. Maybe not, I admitted. But I know how to build something worth running. And I know the difference between leadership and theft. He left without another word, his Tesla keys jangling in his pocket, a reminder of everything he'd gained by claiming others' work as his own. Sandra approached as I gathered my things. The basement office doesn't suit a CTO's. We'll have you moved back upstairs immediately. Actually, I said, thinking of Tom and the other engineers who'd supported me, I might have some ideas about restructuring that don't involve basements or hierarchies based on ego rather than merit. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from management in months. I think we're going to work well together, Ms. Cole? The final negotiation took place 3 days later in a conference room at Baker & Associates, a neutral law firm downtown. I arrived with Marla and 2 additional patent attorneys she'd brought from DTMDC. Across the table sat Sonix's legal team, Sandra Williams, and the full board of directors. Julian's absence was conspicuous. Let's review the proposed terms, Sandra began, sliding a document across the table. Sonix acknowledges Ms. Cole's ownership of patent US 9898274B1. We're offering a licensing fee of $1.5 million upfront plus 15% royalties on all products utilizing the technology. I didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch. Marla had coached me on this. Never accept the first offer, especially when you hold all the cards. The Samsung deal alone is worth $10 million, I said finally. And that's just one application of my technology. We both know the medical device market for this algorithm could reach hundreds of millions. David Park shifted uncomfortably. That's potential revenue, not guaranteed. Neither is Sonix's survival without my patent, I interrupted. But I'm not here to destroy the company. I helped build this product line. I want to see it succeed. I paused. Under the right leadership. Sandra leaned forward. What are you proposing? I pulled out my own document, prepared with Marla's team. $3 million upfront, 25% royalties, and board representation. I want a say in how my technology is developed and deployed. The Sonix lawyers whispered urgently. One of them, a senior partner named Harrison, spoke up. 25% is unprecedented. So is trying to sell stolen technology for $10 million. Marla interjected smoothly. My client is being generous by not pursuing damages for willful infringement. We didn't know, Harrison began. Ignorance isn't a defense. Marla continued. Mr. Marks had multiple opportunities to verify ownership. He chose not to. That's negligence at best. Fraud at worst. Sandra raised a hand. Let's focus on moving forward. Ms. Cole, what about the leadership issue? This was the moment I'd been building toward. I have specific requirements. Julian Marks must not only resign, but sign a non-compete preventing him from working in medical devices for 3 years. His golden parachute is forfeit. That money goes to an innovation fund for the engineering team. And his public statement must acknowledge that the core technology was my invention, developed before joining Sonics. That's vindictive, Harrison protested. That's accountability, I corrected. He tried to steal my life's work. He demoted me to a basement office. He laughed in my face when I protested. Actions have consequences. Sandra exchanged glances with the other board members. And if we agree to these terms? Then I'll work with Sonics to transition the technology properly. I'll personally lead the Samsung negotiations to salvage that deal. And I'll consider staying on as CTO to ensure the product reaches its full potential. Consider? David asked. I want to see the new CEO first, I explained. I won't work under another Julian Marks. The negotiation continued for 3 more hours. Every point was debated, every term scrutinized. But I held firm on the essentials: acknowledgement, compensation, and accountability. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows, Sandra called for a break. Give us 30 minutes to discuss. Marla and I retreated to a small break room. You're doing great, she assured me. They're scared. The Samsung deal is dead without you, and they know it. I don't want to destroy Sonics, I admitted. I just want what's fair. And what's fair is what you can negotiate. Marla replied, You built something valuable. Don't let guilt make you settle for less than it's worth. When we reconvened, Sandra's expression was resigned but not hostile. The board has agreed to your terms with one modification. The upfront payment will be 2.5 million Ds. But we'll increase royalties to 27%. The Innovation Fund will receive Julian's entire severance package. He'll sign the non-compete and issue the statement you requested. I looked at Marla, who nodded slightly. Acceptable, I said. There's one more thing, Sandra added. We want you to sign on as CTO officially, not just consider it. The Samsung team was clear. They'll only move forward if you're leading the technical development. I thought about the basement office, the stolen credit, the systematic marginalization. Then I thought about Tom and the other engineers who'd supported me, about the technology that could save lives, about proving that innovation matters more than ego. 6-month trial period, I countered. If the new CEO and I can work together effectively, I'll sign a longer contract. But I want the right to walk away if history repeats itself. Sandra extended her hand. Deal. As I shook her hand, I felt the weight of the past months lifting. I hadn't just protected my invention, I'd proven that technical brilliance couldn't be bullied into submission. Welcome back to Sonics, Dr. Cole, Sandra said, using my title for the first time. I believe you have a $10 million deal to salvage. 6 months later, I stood in a different conference room, watching Boulder's morning sun paint the Flatirons gold. But this time, I wasn't a silent observer in someone else's show. The nameplate on the door read, Dr. Weiss, Avery Cole, Chief Technology Officer. And the presentation on the screen was mine to deliver. The HeartSound 3.0 has exceeded all benchmarks, I told the assembled team, which included Samsung's executives participating virtually. We're detecting cardiac anomalies at 97.3% accuracy, with false positives below 0.8%. The FDA fast-track approval came through last week. The room erupted in applause. Tom Rodriguez, now VP of Engineering, caught my eye and grinned. The Innovation Fund, funded entirely by Julian's forfeited severance, had allowed us to hire 3 more brilliant engineers and upgrade our equipment. The basement office was now a state-of-the-art lab where ideas flourished instead of dying. The international rollout begins next quarter, I continued. Starting with pediatric hospitals in Seoul, Tokyo, and Singapore. We estimate this technology will screen over 1 million newborns in the first year alone. After the meeting, Sandra pulled me aside. The board met yesterday. We'd like to make your position permanent. And there's someone I want you to meet. She led me to the CEO's office, Julian's former temple to ego, now transformed into a collaborative workspace with glass walls and open seating. Behind the desk sat Dr. Catherine Okafor, a biomedical engineer with 15 years of experience bringing medical devices to market. Avery, she said, standing to shake my hand. I've been following your work since your MIT days. When Sandra told me you were here, I knew I had to take this position. We talked for an hour about the future of Sonex, about technologies that could democratize healthcare, about building a company culture where innovation thrived and credit went where it was due. By the end, I knew my 6-month trial was over. I'd found a leader who understood that great companies are built on great ideas, not stolen ones. That evening, I treated Marla to dinner at Boulder's finest restaurant. I could finally afford it with my licensing fees. You saved my career, I told her over champagne. You saved your own career, she corrected. I just helped with the paperwork. My phone buzzed with a news alert. TechCrunch had published their story. How one engineer's patent battle transformed Sonex Labs into a biotech leader. The article included Julian's mandated statement acknowledging my invention. He'd left Colorado entirely, last I heard, trying to start over in Texas with significantly less credibility. Any regrets? Marla asked. I thought about it. Just one. I wish I'd stood up for myself sooner. All those months in the basement, thinking I had to play by their rules. I shook my head. But maybe I needed that time to prepare. To document everything, to let them reveal exactly who they were. The next morning, I arrived early to the office, as was my habit. But instead of sneaking to a basement dungeon, I walked confidently to the CTO suite. My assistant had already prepared my schedule, a morning with the engineering team, lunch with potential investors interested in our next innovation, an afternoon call with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia about implementing our technology. I paused at my desk, looking at the framed patent certificate on the wall. Patent, your US 9898274E1. My insurance policy had become my liberation. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Tom stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this. Long day ahead. Thanks, I said, accepting the cup. How's the team feeling about the new acoustic isolation algorithm? Excited, Emma thinks she can improve efficiency by 12%. He paused. You know, what you did, standing up to Julian, protecting your work, it inspired a lot of us. We've started documenting our innovations better, understanding our rights. Good, I said. Innovation should be rewarded, not stolen. As Tom left, I opened my laptop to review the day's priorities. An email from Samsung caught my eye. They wanted to discuss expanding our partnership to include their consumer wellness devices. The technology I developed in my garage was about to help millions of people worldwide. I thought back to that moment in the conference room when Julian had laughed in my face, so certain he'd won. He'd seen a quiet engineer he could exploit, a woman he could marginalize, a creator whose work he could claim. He'd been wrong on all counts. I smiled, remembering his words. Your 10-meter idea is mine now. No, Julian. It never was. The patent made sure of that. And in the end, the person who laughed last wasn't the smooth-talking CEO with the Harvard MBA and the Tesla keys. It was the engineer from Ohio who'd learned that the best revenge isn't destroying those who wrong you. It's succeeding beyond their wildest imagination while they watch from the sidelines, knowing they threw away their chance to be part of something extraordinary. My phone rang. Catherine's name appeared on the screen. Avery, the White House Office of Science and Technology wants to discuss our infant screening program. Are you free next Tuesday? I'll make time, I said, already pulling up my calendar. As I coordinated the details, I glanced once more at the patent on my wall. Sometimes the best protection isn't a lawyer or a contract. It's the foresight to document your brilliance before anyone else can claim it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the quiet ones in the basement are the most dangerous of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of sweet revenge and justice served cold, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up for your work against someone who tried to steal credit? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments.